From Los Angeles, the home of film and television, this is Film Music Live, a webcast featuring outstanding composers, orchestrators, filmmakers, and more from the world of music for film, television, and video games, talking about their work and answering your questions. Film Music Live is sponsored by the Film Music Network and Film Music Institute. And now the host of Film Music Live, Daniel Schweiger.
Hey everyone, I'm Daniel Schweiger, and welcome to Film Music Live, the show where you get to ask the questions to today's top composers. I'm so happy to have you here.
Bernard Herrmann created a conflagration with Laird Cregar's crazed composer-conductor for Hangover Square before taking a cymbal shot with the Storm Clouds Cantata in The Man Who Knew Too Much. Then John Barry's Romance for Guitar and Orchestra lethally landed Michael Caine for Deadfall, adding another faux classical piece to the rich tradition of music designed to work as much for a cinematic concert stage as the story being told around it. But none of these performances are as perilous for your souls or your children's as the piece in The Piper, a diabolically clever, music-centric horror film written and directed by Iceland's Erlingur Thorodsen that imagines a devilish concerto for children composed by no less a diabolical musician than a very real Pied Piper of Hamelin, whose concert serves as a conduit to raise his vengeful spirit from hell. When you've got the idea of unlocking a piece of a musical puzzle with a twisted fairy tale sound, there's no better composer to call upon than America's Christopher Young. Unleashing a legendary horrific score in service of England's Clive Barker and his Cenobites from Hellraiser's Puzzle Box, Young's horror scoring has been as memorably melodic as its ability to be terrifyingly abstract. Christopher Young's work has certainly scarred more than a few generations of kids for life, and it's music whose lead doesn't get more brutally or hypnotically mind-ripping than in this rousing, award-winning magnum opus, conjuring a classical piece that makes a mincemeat out of both orchestra and audience in Thorodsen's Chiller that brings an unholy musical legend to life, as heard in the mind of an iconic horror maestro stepping into the rat-catching child snatcher of Hamelin's poison pen and pipe.
And now here's a composer and a filmmaker joining forces to entrance viewers with rapturous performances of delightful musical evil. Welcome Christopher Young and Erlingur Thorodsen to Film Music Live.
Daniel, it's so great to see you again. We're best of buddies. We've known each other since the beginning, nearly the beginning of time. Certainly since the beginning of your time after you moved to Los Angeles. We've known each other and have been in cahoots.
Well, 5 years ago. And first of all, I just have to start off by wishing you both happy birthday.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Erlinger, yours was the day before yesterday.
Yeah, mine was on Saturday, 27th, and yours was yesterday, right?
That is correct.
Yeah.
I turned 33, which means you must have turned like 17.
17, yes, exactly.
Exactly. Okay. That's the wonderful thing about, let me just make this one. The wonderful thing about having birthdays in California, or at least Los Angeles, is that on your birthday, no one dares ask you how old you are because they themselves are terrified that on their birthday, you'll ask them the same question. Yeah, there you go.
So Erlinger, let's start off. What got you into genre filmmaking, and how essential was Christopher Young's music to that?
Well, I've been a horror movie fan since I was way too young to be watching horror movies. Like when I was, even before I was 10 years old, I was kind of sneaking, into the living room, watching behind my parents' backs. And I was I am old enough to be from the VHS generation and the video store generation, so I would go to the video stores, and I would always just kind of gravitate towards the horror movie section, and even though I wasn't old enough to rent the movies, I would just kind of look at the covers and kind of dream about what happened in the movies, and that's kind of how it started. And one of the more kind of memorable VHS covers obviously is Hellraiser, and I remember seeing that movie for the first time and like hearing those notes from Chris's score, that kind of they bring that film alive in such a powerful way. And so I became a fan of Chris's also very, very young. And so my kind of love for horror and my love for Chris's music has kind of gone hand in hand for many, many years.
And Erlinger, what was the genesis of this movie?
Well, genesis of the movie was, it started, I kind of, I was familiar with the fairy tale of the Pied Piper, the German story, but I kind of reread it a few years ago, and felt like, oh, there's something very dark and disturbing here. And it hadn't really been, made, there weren't that many movies that had been made from that story. So I felt like, okay, there's an opportunity here to do something. And in my mind, I was like, okay, what if we kind of bring it to the modern day? And, what if it's, less about the Piper himself and more about the music that, the melody that he created that led these children away. And then I started thinking like, okay, what if the main character is, a composer who works for a symphony orchestra? And, if the Piper can lead children away just with the flute, what happens if a whole orchestra plays the music? And that's kind of how it all started. And so even from even before I started writing anything, I knew that the music was going to be, the key element to everything, basically.
Wow. And Erlinger, was Chris just automatically right there at, okay, this is the composer I'm going to get? Because obviously you have to have this whole concerto done before you even shoot the film.
Yeah, I mean, Chris was like my number one choice always, but in my mind, I was like, oh, he's too big, he's, how am I, I didn't know him or anything. How am I even going to get in touch with him? And as it turned out, the producers of The Piper, they had already been working with him on another film that they were making called The Offering. And it was really kind of one of those weird coincidences because I had no idea about that. And when I brought Chris's name up to them, they were like, you know what? We've actually been talking to him about this other movie. Let's check it out. Let's see what he says. And I think that's just, we sent Chris the script and the ball started rolling from there.
Chris, when you were approached with this project, what hit you? I mean, and this is, as I said in the beginning, it's a whole kind of rarefied genre when you have like a kind of fake piece of classical music specifically written to be performed in a movie.
Well, of course, that was appealing because it made the film unique right off the get-go. Is that how often does this happen in a movie? You mentioned at the beginning of this handful of situations where that is the case, where a concert work is written for the film and then integrated into the storyline. So that was like, wow, this is, because I spent a lot of time fantasizing of trying to write things for the concert stage and have reworked some of my old scores to fulfill that fantasy. But indeed, here's the thing, is that I was so thrilled to get a call from Erlinger, someone who had become aware of me when he was younger, and it was through the score, as he mentioned, to Hellraiser, and still had followed what I was doing. And let's face it, everybody's career in LA kind of goes through ups and downs, and as it often has been humorously said, an LA Hollywood career is nothing but a series of comebacks. And so I immediately, when I heard that he was interested, I didn't care even what the film was, as long as it wasn't a horror porno film. I was game to come on board because I was honored. I mean, truly honored that he was holding me in his heart. And so just that alone made me want to sign on the dotted line. I get very emotionally attached to the movies. I believe in them 150% once I'm on board. And certainly the director, whoever that may be, I'm devoted to for having thought of me. So, like I said, I was thrilled. I loved the script. I loved it, and it's about music. I mean, come on, I knew the music was going to be featured in a way that usually is not the case anymore. I just did this Nosferatu rescoring, which was for a silent movie. And wow, I mean, there's not only no dialogue, but no sound effects. So it was just music and picture. And I knew this is probably the closest I was ever going to get to that. The idea of writing a multiple movement concerto featuring the flute and a children's choir was very important. Erlinger, you kept referring to it as the children's concerto. And I still think of it as a flute concerto with children's choir.
Right. And
it features the flute really more than it does the children's choir.
Now we've got a first question from Louis Versalini, and he'd like to know, how many concertos did you end up writing for the Piper, which I guess could translate, what was the development process like for writing this piece of music?
Well, there's 3 movements. I was asked, Erlinger, correct me if I'm wrong, we kind of thought that there were 3 different types of moods or types of material that would be needed for whatever you were planning on shooting with the live orchestra, the filmed orchestra, which actually were musicians, but they didn't even have the completed orchestral music to fake to. They just had a piano performance of it with a solo flute overdub that the actor was guided by a real flautist on how do you finger this, for those close-ups and whatnot. But indeed, it was decided that 3 movements was the right amount. Originally, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Aaron, you were thinking of having, 14, 15, maybe up to 16 minutes of actual screen time of the orchestra?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it was always in the script. There was always 3 movements that kind of, fit the act structure of the story. So we wanted to keep that in. And when we were, it's always a little bit of guessing, before you shoot, like how much of anything you need. But we kind of, by counting the script pages of the scenes where they were playing the music, I think we had come up with around 15 minutes or something. And then of course, then you shoot it and then you edit it. And I think it ended up being a little bit less than that in the final film, but that's kind of what we were gunning for.
And then I, rather than just write the exact 15 minutes or 16 minutes, I said, you need some playing room. And so each movement I would add, if it's a 3 movement thing, you need 15 minutes. Well, they could have been 5 minutes long, but each one is about 10 minutes long. So you had an extra 5 minutes of 15, twice the amount of actual writing and performed material to play with, so you could have options. And it worked out perfectly, actually. I think I would not want to take a movement out nor add a movement in this. I've heard that it flows in real time from beginning to end in a kind of, in a comprehensible to the non-musician listener, it makes sense. And I'm going to point out that, the one that was used, the movement that was used in the end credits was the second movement. And that turned out to be Erlinger's favorite movement. And that exists only because you were wise enough, my friend, to, I think that going back is I came up with a bunch of tunes, a bunch of different themes or ideas, and I presented them to you. And then you picked out your favorites. And it so happened that there were 2 that you said, I like this one and I like that one. And I do think that maybe if you join them together somehow, it would make a good movement. And I went, let me try that.
Yeah.
And of course, it was the perfect idea. My favorite, of course, is the last movement, because that's nutty as a fruitcake, and it's rocking and rolling, and it's zooming by at the speed of light for portions of it, and it's where the flute gets to go overboard, and the choir is kind of featured in a rhythmically active way, and finally we get to hear the main theme for the piper picked up by the orchestra.
Yeah.
Now
it opens the gates.
It's a tango rhythm too. It's in a tango.
Yeah.
But go on, sir. What were you saying?
So we've got a question from Scores by Matthew. Chris, what inspired you to go for the orchestral, non-gut wrenching, for the lack of a better term, route when you scored this film? A wonderful difference and very unique.
Let's see. The orchestral thing. Well, I mean, Erlinger was the one who, was really pro from the get-go. We need to do this with an orchestra. Definitely. I think that by doing it with an orchestra, it'll add a kind of an orchestra on a picture does something different than an electronic score on a scary movie does. And so whereas the previous one I did for Millennium, The Offering, was done with synths, this one had to be done with orchestra. And so these decisions are usually made in advance. I can feel a certain way about what the score should be. Like, for instance, on Pet Sematary, the directors and I thought it should have been done. At the beginning, we wanted it to be done with an orchestra, and I started writing that score with an orchestra, and then the producers and whatnot came in and said, "Whoa, you horsies! This is not the right way to do this. We want it electronic, man. Electronic. None of that violin stuff." And so started all over again. So in answer to his question, once Erlinger said, "No, let's do this with orchestra," I went, "Yeah, okay." It's going to make the whole thing richer as a musical listening experience. And if there's going to be a concerto that's for a live group, and we see a live group on the screen, how weird it would have been, I think, to go from a synth score to a live, chamber orchestra on the stage doing live instrumental music. It wouldn't have jived as successfully.
Now, Erlinger, I just love the ending of this film. I mean, the only thing that's missing on the stage is Pinhead coming out with a baton. Because essentially it's like the Hellraiser version of the Pied Piper of Hamelin. What was it like filming that whole end concert, especially using the playback just to kind of hit the notes that are happening within the concert?
I mean, that was, I think, though, that week was the most fun I had filming, because there's something, even though, like Chris said before, like the orchestra, they had, they didn't have like the fully orchestrated kind of version of anything. They were being guided by this kind of a piano version of the movements. But there's something that happens when you have the full orchestra playing it. There's like an energy that kind of comes from the music itself. And you could just I could feel like, okay, this is going, I could imagine like the fine, when the final music is in there, once it's been mixed, like it's going to be crazy. It's going to be amazing. And it needed to be like that in order to kind of get the audience to the point of like, okay, now the doors of hell are gonna open up and something's gonna come out of it. So yeah, it was a really, really fun time. It was also like, a little stressful because it's, there's a lot of, shooting anything with, 3 actors is stressful enough. But when you have 30, 40 people playing in sync and everything has to kind of be coordinated, it kind of, everything becomes a lot more complicated, but in a fun way. It was a great experience.
Now, we have to give a big shout out to the amazing Julian Sans, and he's just great in this movie, and I think it's his next to last film. What Chris, what did Julian Sans' character bring to your music? Have you ever worked with a guy like this, or in Erlinger, what was the experience like?
No, I don't think that kind of temperamentality that the part required. He's a great actor, okay, and he did his homework. His conducting was well schooled or whatever, well thought out, but that kind of temperament, it just doesn't fly anymore. I don't think, yeah, he was like you know kissing a hot coal or something, but I never got a chance to talk to him. We never met. I have no idea what he thought of what the music was all about, whether he liked it or didn't. Tragedy, tragedy, tragedy. What a tremendous actor, and I only wish I'd had a chance to know him. But that his behavior didn't really alter the concerto. Of course, what happens to him at the end of the movie, I had to deal with that with the underscore. But no, nothing specifically about him, nor the group, because I didn't see the group. Of course, I wasn't there when they were shooting it, so it was written in the abstract. I knew, and we were worried about this. Erlinger and I talked about this, that the actual group was going to be a lot smaller than the sound ultimately of the orchestra, because the orchestra was pretty large. It was a large group, and then with this choir of children, I don't remember how about 40 kids were in the group. I thought, wait a second, how big is this? How big was the group? Like you said, 18 people? Like that?
30 people.
Oh, 30 people.
Yeah.
Okay, 30. Yeah. Well, the orchestra that you hear is much, it's twice the size of that. And so, plus more. So, I was concerned that it would be so overwhelmingly big sounding for such a small group that it might have the audience laughing, But fortunately, it didn't happen. What's amazing? I'm going to throw this in here because it's in my head, is that this gentleman here changed my life. I mean, really, when you think about this, I had never been given a chance to write anything quite like this, in which the music was a featured part. To write a concerto, how many composers in the history of film music can say that they've been given this opportunity? Not many. And that it won an award, that you're interviewing me about this. It's amazing how it's opened up the door, and I'm sort of like a resurrected monster coming back to life or something. But it's great, and so that's the thing that makes my head spin, is that you were kind enough to bring me on board.
Yeah, Erlinger, what was the experience like? And is this just how well Julian nailed that? Because again, the movie would be nothing if he didn't believe this, if he didn't believe the concerto.
Yeah, I mean, first, I just want to say thank you to Chris also. I mean, what an awesome experience it has been to go through all of this with you, like hand in hand, lockstep. I mean, I think, I've told you this before, but like, I think this music is just the greatest thing ever. So I'm just thrilled that like this is out in the world now. And I can tell you, like Julian, I gave him the piano versions of the concerto, and he really loved the music. And I remember like in the first conversations with Julian, like even before he kind of signed on to the movie himself, like he had a great fondness for classical music and the arts in general, and so we talked about the music a lot, just between the two of us. And I know he was very, very impressed and very excited about how the film was starting to sound. And obviously he heard when we were filming with the orchestra, he heard kind of the demo version of the music, but it got him into the right mood. And the intensity that he's giving on the screen, I think is very, very connected to the intensity of the music. I think, for him hearing what it was going, even though it wasn't the final version, just knowing kind of where it was going kind of gave him permission to kind of go as far as he did. But he was such a great guy. He really kind of elevated, the set. Wonderful to work with, very generous with his time and with his talent. I know, I can speak for everybody on the set, like all the other actors and the crew. They really loved him, loved being around him, and it's very sad what happened. But I'm very grateful to have had that opportunity to do the film with him.
Well, he's certainly memorable. Now, we've got a question from Louis. Hey guys, Christopher, I know that after years of scoring horror movies, now it must feel natural, but in the beginning, what musical sources did you study or listen to for inspiration? And I can further, with this movie, what was the inspiration for this concerto?
Right. No, first of all, I'm going to answer the first statement. Yes, I've worked in a lot of scary movies over the years, many, many, many. But believe me when I tell you, when I'm starting up a project, I'm scared shitless because I'm afraid it's all gone. I've got a blank slate. I can't remember the scores that I worked on. I don't carry, they're in my head somewhere, but it's not like they're front center seat that I can call on and feel confident that that's going to guide me through the score and make it work. And I'm kind of glad that doesn't happen, because I want so badly, as does every film composer. I want this one to be the best. It's got to outdo what I did before. And by the way, I can't remember what I did before. And if I could, it would probably do more harm than good. So I'm always trying to reinvent the wheel. If there's samples that are electronic colors, it better be a whole bunch of new sounds. You know how it goes. You start running out of time, and you do dig into your bag of tricks subconsciously to get you through a cue quickly if you're running, like I said, running out of time. But the intent is never to repeat yourself. In terms of the concerto itself, I went out and first of all, I spent a hell of a lot of time listening to flute concertos of all shapes and sizes, primarily more modern ones than the old ones. Looked at the scores, checked out different ones that used extended flute techniques. But I would have to say the two greatest influences indeed, though there's the albatross that was on my back the entire time I was working on it. The concert/film composer John Corigliano wrote a piece called The Pied Piper Fantasy, which is for flute and orchestra and children's choir, or not, they don't sing, actually, children's group that play penny whistles. That's quite a remarkable piece. And to have that sort of sitting in the background, knowing that it was based on the same story, was terrifying. The other inspiration, I would say, when I was a kid, I got into the prog rock thing when I was still in my, rock and roll period. It was my last connection to rock. My farewell to rock and roll was getting into the prog rock thing. And the band Jethro Tull, as you probably know, the principal flautist in that, or the only flautist in the band, the leader of the band, Ian Anderson, was the first flautist in a pop background or whatever, rock backdrop that did all this flute stuff in which different techniques were being used, altering the sound through breathing, over blowing, talking, and this and that into the flute, using it as a percussion instrument. That definitely influenced me. It was in the back of my head. Nothing in particular, not a piece in particular, but just that performance type technique. Because in my mind, I always saw the flautist as being an aggressive front player, and running around the stage, a bit, like
Now,
he did.
Now, Erlinger, we've got a question from Aaron. I think this is actually your third feature film. So the question is, what do you look for when choosing a composer for your horror films?
Well, I think it's the same thing that I look for with anybody kind of coming on board the project. It's first of all, I think do we share the vision, or do we kind of at least share the kind of the mood for the film. I always have a lot of ideas, but I don't want to, smother anybody with, I don't want to be a dictator. I think any person you work with, you want it to be a collaboration. You want, the other person to bring something great of their own. And I think, with Chris, obviously having, known his work, I knew that he had so much, to bring to this project. And, in our first meetings, like I had I had some references. Then he, I think actually, going back to your, the introductory clip at the very beginning of the show, I think you showed a clip from Hangover Square. And I'm pretty sure Chris was the one who introduced me to that film. We talked about Bernard Herrmann. So yeah, I think it's mostly it's just that, like, finding the common kind of, how we see the film, are we in agreement? And then, what can we do to bring it to the next level, try and build on top of each other. I think that's the most important thing in any collaboration.
Erlinger might command the speed to do a biopic about Laird Krieger. Now that's a whole story right there. We've got a question from Ivan Sorkin of the Bond Music. Chris, your filmography covers almost every genre: horror, thriller, romantic films, action. But which one is your favorite one, and which one is the most difficult for you to work in?
Genre you're talking about, which is my favorite, and which do I find most difficult to work in? Well, I've never done an animated movie, and I suspect if I did, I would find that probably pretty difficult, because it would truly require that I expand my mind. I'm not saying I can't do it. I'd love to see what I would do, but it would require something that reaches beyond what my comfort zone is. Of course, anyone who lusts or has these fantasies of getting an Oscar nomination knows, or Golden Globe nomination, knows that the kind of films that you have to work on to get into the consideration game are probably high quality dramas. Very rarely do horror films or scores make it into that final a pot of nominatable works. I think the last one, actually, the score that won an Oscar that was a scary movie, was Jerry Goldsmith's Omen score, and that goes back to the 70s. So, of course, I dream about working on the ultimate, or a top flight drama, because as much as I do love writing music that illuminates what I call that invisible world, that element of mystery. I don't like make people scream. That's not my thing. But if the music can unlock this dimension that allows the viewer to take a journey into something which is mystifying, then this is fantastic. So I do love horror films or scary films. Not a big slasher film type, but again, any movie where I get to do something again that I don't know, takes us on a journey into that infinite world of the unexplainable, if that makes sense. Tunes, boy, there's nothing quite like writing a tune that everyone can remember. And that doesn't happen in horror films. We remember the motives, but we don't really remember the tunes. It's in the dramas and the romantic films that at the end, you walk away with a theme that you can hum and it makes you smile. And, interesting with this movie, and I owe this to Erlinger totally, is the tune that ultimately became the main theme for the Piper was not the one that I was intending. That tune you hear in the first movement, but I remember I heard you and some of the producers wanted to have a call with me early in the morning because you felt I hadn't found the right theme yet. And you were so great in the way you handled that. Seriously, you guys were really great because it wasn't like, you stupid shit. You got to be kidding me. You call this the tune for the theme for this movie? No, you were afraid. You were very gentle in saying, Chris, I think we need something that's more memorable. And I knew that's what you were going to do that morning. So I wrote the night before, I think I wrote 4 different options. And we went through the first one and you went, okay. The second one, no, guys, yeah, that's a. Then I played the third one. I noticed it was very quiet after the third one. And I thought, well, either they think that's the piss or they're, contemplating it. And they went, yeah. Then I played them the fourth one and they went, okay. Can we hear the third one again? Remember that? You said, can we hear the third one again? And then I played the third one more time. They said, that's the theme. That's the one.
Yeah.
Right? Remember that?
We instantly, we knew. I knew just hearing it that time. And it wasn't even that the other the previous themes, there wasn't anything wrong with them.
No,
I think what I was looking for mostly was just something that kind of was instantly kind of like a children's lullaby that you hear it once and it gets stuck in your head.
And I got to tell you something. Composers are often inclined to find fault in the director's tastes in music. Oh, that director, I had this vision of the music being this, and he wanted that, and it ruined the score, and blah 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 blah. I swear to God, I think would I have picked that one? Probably not. I don't know which one I would have picked, but it took you and the rest of the gang to bring to light the fact that indeed it was the best. And so I say, moments like that are really important. And chances are you, the director, knows what is right. Even though we may think you know all wrong, you know right. This has happened to me many times before, where I'm presenting material and ultimately the choice the director makes, if I'm giving them options, is the right one.
Right. Now, Chris, we got a question from Pranav. How would you approach orchestration choices with different music, film cliches, and with different genres like lush orchestration versus subtle? Actually, let me kind of redirect that here and to talk about the orchestration for the Piper.
Okay. I should have done my homework and looked at the group again to determine exactly what was the size of the group. I knew that there were. I wanted to, of course, since the flute is the primary instrument of this movie. The story is all about the flute. I thought that yes, we have the flute solo, the unaltered one that is being played by the lead character, by the lead actress. When her character's name is what, Erlinger, remind me?
Melanie.
Mel, thank you. Melanie, when she's up there playing it, it's not altered. It's pretty much a straight flute with some extended techniques and whatever. Then we have the Piper himself, who's playing, whenever that he's playing a flute, it's modified. And actually, there's some of me assisting him playing through these weird wood flutes that I have added to the pot. But I knew that this was a flute going to, if I can include an ensemble of flutes in the orchestra, that would be nice. So indeed, I think I had 6 flutes in the orchestra, from the bass to the piccolo, working as a group, either playing chords that immediately gave it this dark, low chords to create the sense of mystery, or clusters, or weaving lines, counterpoint, but using the flutes to add this level of mystery. Now I know that the thrown out score for Torn Curtain by Bernard Herrmann featured a lot of flutes, and that was sort of in the back of my mind. The material is completely different, but I know that I wasn't the first to bring in 6 flutes into a score. I think he had like 12 or something. But anyway, the flute was an important color. Low brass was an important color. I used these low brass chords, clusters, whatnot, to create a specific live sonority. Again, manipulating voices, that's an important part of the sound of the picture, of the score. So it essentially is a traditional string orchestra with add-ons that sort of give it a color twist, that hopefully is in line with the fact that the orchestral concerto portions of it, and the actual piper playing his flute, they all add up to some sort of palette that work as a team and create a general I don't know what you want to call, canvas of sonic colors that harmonize with each other.
Please forgive the shenanigans of my animal menagerie today. They're just totally out of control. But anyways, I'm going to jump into your insane past, musical past, Chris. And we've got a question from Dale. Chris, can you go back in time and walk us through some methods behind the madness of your incredible score for The Vagrant? Really a pretty insane movie and score.
You know what? I am so thrilled. Who's this from?
Dale, our producer.
Dale, okay. I'm so thrilled that you highlight that score. Anytime anyone highlights that score, it's a rush, because indeed it was one of those situations on a movie which unfortunately didn't do very well. It was a black comedy, and black comedies are really hard to make successfully, and score, oh my God. The wonderful thing about that movie, that was one of a handful of movies in which, when I was approached, Chris Walas, the director, and Mel Brooks, the producer on it, really had no idea how to tempt the thing. And they tried with scary music, and it took the laughs out of it. They tried putting comedic movie music into it, and it took the scares out of it. So when they came to me, they had absolutely no temp in the movie, and they said, "Best of luck. I have no way to guide you on this." And of course, that was very scary, and at the same time wonderful, because there was nothing I was going to have in my head guiding me, meaning a temp, which is hard to shake once it's in your head. But in that instance, I decided to, being an ex-drummer, to have at its core use a chamber group that was percussively oriented, to pre-record these little 8-bar percussion loops that I then strung together. But it's really the ensemble that makes the score different. At the core of it was a string quartet with a stand-up acoustic bass. There was a live piano. It's not very exciting. A live xylophone, not very exciting. A live accordion, which is getting exciting. A live melodica, which doesn't happen that often. Timpani, but then there were the pre-recorded, and 3 alto voices, The percussion included as a pre-record, rhythms that were like the Spanish flamenco rhythms with actual foot stomping and castanets and finger snaps, and there's me breathing on it, and garbage can lids being smashed and typewriters being played. So I opened up the world there of creating sonorities, a combination of weird instruments that kind of immediately said, okay, this picture's a little out there. I got two of the best compliments ever on that one. One was from Mel Brooks, who said to me, I had no idea what this picture really was until I heard your score up against it, number one. And number two, everyone was trying to get a compliment from Jerry Goldsmith or John Williams when I moved out here. It was the only score that Jerry actually singled out and complimented me on. So I was thrilled that happened. We got stuck on an elevator together going up a building for a Christmas party. It was just me and he and Carol, his wife, and it was the dream come true to get a positive response from him. I've since fucked around with that and turned it into this really weird suite. And I'm really excited about that because it's taking that material and having it go even further to the left.
Erlinger, what is a Chris favorite for you?
For me, well, apart from the Hellraisers, one that I really, really like is The Dark Half, the George Romero film, and we actually used a lot of that in the temp for the Piper. Copycat, I really love. Of some of the more kind of recent ones, I really love the stuff Chris did for Scott Derrickson, like Deliver Me from Evil, Deliver Us from Evil, and Sinister. Sinister is so creepy and so weird, and there's like sounds in that score that we also used a lot of those sounds in the temp for the Piper. The Empty Man I thought was awesome. Drag Me to Hell is awesome. I mean, there's a lot of them, but I really I love writing to The Dark Half. That's one of my kind of go-to writing scores. So I think that's the one that I would pick for this conversation, at least.
Wow.
Right. So, Jürgen, actually, in terms of the amazing stuff that you've done that is not genre at all, just watched the Rum Diary concert and loves the Rum Diary. It's an incredible jazz score. How about other concerts featuring your work in the future, Chris? And again, we got to talk about Nosferatu, which just had a huge Kickstarter. Exactly.
First of all, thank you for being there for the Rum Diary performance. That happened here in town at the Catalina Bar and Grill. And that was like one of the best nights of my life. Wow. I think we got more people into that room than they never had because it was not just for a jazz. I think there was 9 people in the band plus a string section. And that is where it got maddening. The only thing that was missing from that evening, other than Johnny Depp, who said he was going to come but he didn't come, was that there wasn't a bus waiting to take us to the next stop. If the film had been a hit, maybe we could have taken that on the road. But in terms of concerts, yes, the most exciting thing that's happened as of late was the live performance in Zurich with the Tonhalle Orchestra of the score that I wrote to the rewrote, I should say, as an alternative to the original score for the black and white classic German film Nosferatu. And that was like a dream come true. 94 minutes and 34 seconds of nonstop music in which there were no distractions whatsoever. That was a dream come true. And that's going to come out on CD after I make some corrections to it. Concerts coming up. I was just in Prague and I was asked to put together a 6-minute suite from Hellraiser and Hellbound. But I've had concerts of, or there have been concerts that have included chunks of my stuff. But I've reworked all of so many of my scores into longer suites or tone poems. And I would love there be a day, I'm still dreaming, and this will happen here in town one day, or hopefully more than one day, but right around Halloween, if not this year, perhaps next year or the following year, a concert of nothing but scores I've written for horror films.
Wow, great.
The dream come true, the dream concert.
I will have to fly out.
Yeah.
When that happens, yeah.
Yeah, so much fun. It would be great.
Erlinger,
what's that? You know about the horror fans, Erlinger. I mean, they love, I mean, they don't just love it. They say, we live this.
We live this, yes.
Yeah. So I think a lot of fans would love to be a part of it because it's a horror event, you know.
Yeah. Erlinger, I'd love to see them do a Piper night in Iceland.
Yeah, I mean, that
really
would be the dream come true.
Well,
play the full concerto.
Oh shit, man! Wouldn't that be out of this world? You know, I mean,
I'll talk to some people. I'll do my best to make
they have an orchestra, don't they?
Yeah, there's a pretty good the Icelandic Symphony Orchestra.
Yeah, and they must have a flautist who would love to be featured.
No, I mean, I think for me, one of the coolest things I've ever seen in concert anywhere, which leads us to our next question, was seeing you do Ghost Rider live at the Golden State Pops. And Dimitris from Greece, my favorite score of yours is Ghost Rider. Can you talk a little bit about your ideas for that one?
Right, the Ghost Rider picture. Mark Steven Johnson was the director. That goes way back. I saw the film, loved it, of course, and immediately I said, you know, somehow I got to get a heavy metal band into this, you know. Well, you know, I'm a motorcycle with the flames and everything. And so, indeed, the score, what makes it kind of unique is it's for a gigantic orchestra and choir, but it's enhanced with a heavy metal band. And when I recorded it, the guitarist on it was from a 9 Inch Nails, and the drummer was from White Zombie, and that stuff was pre-recorded. Now for the live concert, that was for a Varese concert, Varese Sarabande concert, and they asked me to come up with it's always 10 minutes. 10 minutes seems to be the magic number for film music. Performances of a score can't go over 10, but you can go under. So I created a 10-minute suite, which I've since expanded on, in which I had again a live a drummer, Dave Lombardo. Dave Lombardo played the drums, a fantastic drummer, and then guitar. I didn't have an electric bass on that one. Because the bass section covered those parts successfully. But yes, I think it went over really well as a live thing. The audience seemed to dig it. And boy, that would probably, if this Halloween concert, I'd probably include that one, you know, because of the heavy metal part of it, you know. Yeah. So that was a night to remember. And I think it was the closing. As I recall, I think they ended the concert with that. And the audience kind of went berserk. Now, there's a suite that I've done of Drag Me to Hell, you know, and a 10-minute version of that one was performed in Tenerife. And apparently, according to Bob Townsend, you know, the famous ex-Varese record producer, now concert producer, said that the response, he was asked the question, what was the best response you ever have heard from a live performance of like a suite or something from a picture score? And he said, unquestionably, the audience went, he's never seen anything as he did with the performance of that, in Tenerife. So that was great. The audience nearly were so overwhelmed, but they started to rip off their clothes.
that
That
sounds
happens. That happens often in film music concerts, as you know.
Yeah.
You know what's cool is that it's always kind of been my feeling that that classical concerts like this imaginary thing, essentially film music is the new version of classical music. Erlinger, do you subscribe to that?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what got me into classical music. I think especially when you're young and the world of classical music, it's huge. It's hard to know where to begin. But I think when you're young and you kind of start with an appreciation for a movie, and then it's like, oh, I love this movie and I love the music in this movie. Let me find that CD. Let me listen to that on its own, and then you kind of go from there. And then eventually, maybe you like, if you're like me, then you kind of find your way into classical music through that. So yeah, I definitely think there's like a connection there, and yeah, for sure.
So I guess to kind of wrap up the show, I can only imagine that the Piper's got a couple of more tunes left in him after this is over. And again, it's such a terrific film. Erlinger, Chris, where does the Piper go? Where does another hidden concert of the Piper go to?
Iceland, I guess.
Iceland, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if we could get even a performance of one of the movements, in one of their classical concerts, because I'm with you that film music is the new classical music. Some cities, major cities, but not all, have a station devoted to classical music. But usually, you got to be dead for at least 100 years before you're going to get played on that radio station. So, for the most part, little boys and girls hear an orchestra for the first time when they go to see a movie. So it's not surprising that that through the introduction of film music, they all of a sudden become aware of this whole new palette of music and style of music called orchestra music, and they fall in love with how it works with the movies that they love. And so, indeed, the only thing I think should be changed, of course, are the concerts themselves. They play like pop concerts. They're not really organized in with a classical, aesthetic, where you don't go to a classical concert and have 23 different selections from 23 different pieces played in an evening. It's usually 4 or 5 pieces at the maximum that are featured, And I'm looking forward to the day when we go to a film music concert in which 4 scores are chosen, and we get to hear a larger portion of that score other than just the main or the end titles,
Yeah, I think actually maybe my question is more like a sequel to the Piper. Where does the sequel go? Where does the other?
I don't know. Are you doing a sequel, do you think, Erlinger?
Well, I mean, you never know. There's nothing in the books right now, but who knows what the future will bring. There were definitely a lot of ideas that came up on set, and several ideas that have come up since then. I think it would be really fun to kind of take that story to a kind of a different place, and see what happens. And I think also would be really interesting to see what Chris can cook up for the next chapter, if that ever happens.
Well, even if that doesn't happen, my friend, you are such a remarkable talent, and that the future of scary movies, horror films, are kind of in your hands here. And I'm sure whatever you're writing now, or you're going to be writing, is going to have something about it that makes it stand out from the crowd and allow for music to do something extraordinary, because you are so tuned into that, So I can't wait to see what you do next. A sequel, yeah, that'd be great. But if not, whatever it is you got cooking, Have you got something cooking?
I always have a few things cooking. Yeah, there's too early to talk about now, but there's some scripts, there's some conversations.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good, my friend. That's good.
Well, Christopher and Erlinger, I just want to thank you so much for joining us at Film Music Live. I want you all to watch The Piper video on demand and to buy Christopher Young's score on CD and digital from Entrada Records, whom we thank for our promotional copies today. A big thanks to Peter Hackman at Different Direction Management, Roger Feigelson at Entrada, John Burlingame, our producer Dale Turner, and our graphic designer Mark Banning. And I'll be seeing you on the next Film Music Live. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.